Hey guys, it's Kristen and Bethany here with Girl Defined Ministries, and today we're going to be talking about Hollywood's method for relationships versus God's method. We actually just wrapped up our annual Girl Defined conference, and it was so fun. We had hundreds and hundreds of young women and moms come from all over the world to be a part of this, and it was just such a cool uniting of the sisterhood. But what I loved even more about it is that we were talking about openly with everyone God's incredible design for love, romance, sex, marriage, lasting relationships, and what it takes to build our lives as modern Christian women on the right foundation. And as we unpacked the opening session on Friday night, we really talked about this idea that most of us long for one day to have vibrant marriages, committed marriages, marriages that are built on trust and
faithfulness.
Yes, and faithfulness and commitment. And all of us, most of us would agree, yes, I want that. But then as we step back and we look around and survey the landscape of relationships and marriages today, what we're seeing is the opposite. We're seeing adultery is rampant, unfaithfulness, lack of trust, deceiving each other, just struggling relationships.
Like broke everywhere.
Yes, so much brokenness and pain and devastation happening in marriages, happening in relationships. And so despite the fact that all of us are longing for this beautiful marriage, so few of us are actually experiencing it. So clearly something isn't working. And I think the problem, as we've researched, talked to people, and dug a little deeper beneath the surface, is that so many of us are building our relationships and ultimately our marriages on a really weak foundation. We're looking to Hollywood for advice, Hollywood to answers. We're looking to movies for our cues and saying, oh, that's what a relationship's about. And then we build it on this foundation, but it's ultimately not producing the lasting, vibrant marriages that we're longing for. And so in this video, we're actually going to unpack in a nutshell the first two sessions that we gave at our conference, which really talk about Hollywood's broken version of pursuing relationships and then contrasting that to God's beautiful and strong foundational design that we can pursue as women.
So when thinking about how to build a good relationship, the two of us actually thought of the example of a cake. So when you're building a cake with lots of tiers, like think of a wedding cake, you have the biggest, strongest foundation on the bottom. And then you build a little bit of a smaller tier and then the next tier until you have the cake topper. And when you're building that cake, you intentionally put the strongest, the biggest foundation at the bottom. Because if you didn't have that foundation, everything would crumble. The cake, you've seen it sometimes at weddings where it doesn't have a good foundation and the cake like melts and it falls over because it didn't have a strong foundation. And so I'm gonna actually show you, here is a cake, how it should look like. Okay, so you have a really big foundation at the bottom, then you have the next layer, the next layer, the next tier, all the way up to the top, and it's built the right way, the correct way, so it's actually gonna stand, it's gonna last, it's gonna be able to, when if a little piece of wind comes and knocks the top, it has a good foundation. But so often what we're seeing in Hollywood and really just out in society are really almost like upside down cakes. The bottom foundation, the thing with the most emphasis, is often the most weak foundation. And so when hard times hit, when something happens, the entire relationship crumbles. And that's exactly what we're seeing in society. We're seeing relationships that are built on a really weak foundation. Hollywood's method for relationships, according to our research and really just what you see out in society, what you see in the movies, what you hear in the music, the first tier, the most important thing that we hear that we need to build our relationships on is personal happiness. According to Hollywood, this is the most important thing. Your personal happiness is it. If that is not the foundation, then they say you're going wrong. That's all that matters. You need to build the relationship on personal happiness. That's tier number one, which, as you can see, is not a very strong foundation, but that's what we're told is the most important thing in a relationship. So the next most important thing, according to Hollywood's method, is sexual attraction. You see this in the movies and hear it in the music all of the time. You walk into that coffee shop and you're like, oh, this person like totally turns me on. I'm feeling so attracted to them. And that's so important. Rarely will you ever see anything portrayed as like, well, this person wasn't really attracted to them, but they had great character. No, it's all about like, how do they turn you on? Do they make you feel like, are they so hot? Do they have like every six pack possible? All the muscles. That is important, because if you're not so sexually attracted to them all of the time, then according to Hollywood, you don't have a very good relationship. So you've got personal happiness, you've got sexual attraction, and so far that's our foundation.
And tier number 3 in Hollywood's method for relationships, this tier right here, is infatuation. So they say that once you have personal happiness, you're sexually attracted, you need to feel amazing all the time. You need to feel like you're floating on cloud 9, like you were struck by Cupid, like this is the most amazing feeling you could ever imagine. And that feeling feeling should be there forever. But if the feeling ever goes away, then, oh no, maybe the relationship should end. Maybe it's not good because you don't have the feelings anymore.
You're not in love
yes.
anymore.
So Hollywood, and we've seen this in the movies, you hear it in the music, so much of the foundation of the relationship is based on how someone feels, how they're infatuated, how they're like starstruck. And that is what we build our relationships on and say, as long as I feel good, as long as I feel into it, then it must be right. And the fourth and final tier, once you have all of these 3 tiers in place, is conditional commitment. So not forever commitment, not lifelong commitment, but conditional commitment. And that's what we see, is that if we're happy, we're committed. If we're attracted, we're committed. If we're feeling it, we're committed. But if any of these 3 things crumble, if any of these things go away in the duration of the relationship, the duration of the marriage, then we're told, well, it's not true love anymore. You fell out of love. You're not in love. You shouldn't be committed anymore because you're not feeling it. You're not happy. And so the commitment is conditional. We get out of the relationship, we get divorced, things crumble, things end, because the foundation that all of the relationship was built on is so conditional. And so with this method, this is what Hollywood is telling us in their songs, in their music, what we're seeing in society. This is what relationships are built upon. And we can see that it is not a strong foundation.
It really is so clear that if we build our relationships in this particular order, they're not going to last. They are going to crumble because these are all so temporary. So we need something better. We need something more God-centered, something that comes straight from the creator of relationships himself. We need to get back to God's design for marriage. So instead of building our relationships according to Hollywood's method, we need to be intentional to build them according to God's method. And really, when we look to the creator, when we look to the designer of love, romance, sex, marriage, when we look to him and we start to build our relationships upon his foundation of what he says is most important, it actually changes the process of relationships completely. And instead of having a weak foundation, you actually have a big, strong foundation that gives you the ability to build a good, strong marriage. So we need to figure out, what is a strong foundation? Let's unpack that, and let's unpack 4 contrasting truths to Hollywood's method. So let's talk about what God's method for pursuing Christ-centered relationships actually looks like. So instead of personal happiness being the foundation, the Bible teaches us as Christians that glorifying God should always be the foundation. So according to God's method, tier number 1 is glorifying God. With the foundation of glorifying God, basically that means that you are looking to him. You're saying, God, you are the designer. You are the creator. You invented marriage. You invented love. You invented sex. So instead of basing it off of my feelings, what I think, making it up, going by my rules, I'm going to actually look to you. I'm going to build my relationship on the foundation of your word, upon God's word, because as Christian women, this must be the foundation. This must be the most important thing in our lives. And 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. So as Christian women, this must be our foundation. Looking to Christ, striving to please him, striving to honor him in our romantic relationships and in our marriages must be the first tier, and it must be the foundation. And tier number 2 is agape love. Basically, that means that you love others even when it's hard and even when you don't feel like it. It's a self-sacrificing love. I mean, I have to do this with Kristen sometimes. I don't always feel like loving her, and she for sure doesn't always feel like loving me. But Christ says a good marriage isn't based on that kind of like, ebb and flow. If you feel like loving your spouse today, go for it. If not the next day, don't do it. No, agape love says, I will love you even when I don't feel like it, even when it's hard, because ultimately that's what Christ does for us. And when we look in Romans 5:8, it says this, but God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. He loved us when we were so unlovable, when we were literally rejecting him. He came and gave his life for us. And he's saying, I want you to copy that. I want you to mimic that. I want you to love your husband in that way. Have that agape love and build your marriage on that foundation. So even when he's unlovable, you need to love him and choose to sacrificially love him in that way.
One quick disclaimer that we want to make sure is very clear is that when we're talking about agape love, what we're not saying is that you as a woman need to stay silent in an abusive relationship, whether verbal or physical. If that's happening, we're not saying you stay silent and just love and serve and don't speak up. We're saying that in that you need to go talk to the authorities. You need to reach out and get help. What we're talking about with agape love is that in a marriage, in a relationship, we are cultivating in our own hearts this genuine Christ-centered heart that desires to serve and love others more than it's focused on getting and receiving. Now, moving into tier 3 of God's method for Christ-centered relationships, this tier right here, it's covenant promise. Now you might think like covenant, what even is
that?
A covenant essentially is a word we don't talk about a lot in today's day and age, but in the Bible, it's used a lot. And essentially what it means is a promise that cannot be broken. So in today's marriages, what we see are a lot of conditional promises. We stand at the altar and say, I will marry you until death do me part, till death do us part. But then when hard times strike or whatever happens, the promise is broken. It's not kept. But God is saying, marriages, I have created marriage to be built on a covenant. And essentially what we see in Scripture is that the covenant promise is so strong because it actually reflects a greater picture. God created the marriage to have this covenant, enduring promise because he loves us with that same kind of promise. And throughout Scripture, we see that the marriage relationship between a man and a woman is actually just a small picture, a taste of what God's beautiful relationship looks like with his children, with his church. And God is saying, I am a God who keeps my promises. I do not break my promises. I love you with a covenant love as my children, and I want your marriages to be a reflection of this bigger picture of this covenant love. And so in getting married, it is an awesome thing because we have an opportunity to showcase God's incredible love by keeping our promises in our marriage. And I just want to read an incredible quote by John Piper, who is such a great theologian. He says, the most ultimate thing we can say about marriage is that it exists for God's glory. That is, it exists to display God. And now we see how. Marriage is patterned after Christ's covenant relationship to the church. And therefore, the highest meaning and the most ultimate purpose of marriage is to put the covenant relationship of Christ and his church on display. That is why marriage exists. If you are married, that is why you are married. Staying married, therefore, is not about staying in love. It's about keeping covenant. So we can see that marriage is a lot more serious. It's an institution created by God for humankind, for us to thrive in and enjoy and live life, but also to display this beautiful picture of Christ and the church. So we need to approach it seriously. We need to take who we're going to marry as a very serious thing and really ask the question, am I willing to commit the rest of my life to this person? And if so, great, commit to them, enter the covenant, and let your relationship be a beautiful display of God's enduring, lasting love that he has for us. And the last and final tier in God's beautiful method for Christ-centered relationships, this little cake topper, is sexual intimacy. So often in society, I mean everywhere, what we're seeing is that this is near the bottom, right? That you need to try them out, have sex, get physical, and then later decide if you want to commit, if you want to stick it out for the long term. God is saying, no, sexual intimacy is for marriage, and it's a beautiful celebration of the commitment, of the faithfulness, of the covenant, of the promise that you have with one another. It's a beautiful celebration of that marriage relationship. And we see this in Hebrews 13:4a. It says, let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled. So as single people, we are looking at this beautiful picture and saying, wow, marriage is an awesome relationship designed by God, and sexual intimacy is what God has created to be the celebration of that union, of that covenant that we can enjoy within marriage. And as a married woman, I enjoy the celebration. I waited to experience this in the right order, and it has been an awesome expression of my love and my covenant to my husband. And you, as an unmarried woman, getting married very soon, you and Dave are trusting in God's design. You're saying, yes, Hollywood's method isn't working. I want to embrace God's good design. I want to glorify him in my life. And so y'all are waiting to experience the spectacular cake topper in the right order. So we as modern Christian women need to choose to build our relationships in God's right order, on glorifying him, with agape love next, covenant promise, and then lastly, enjoying sexual intimacy within the right context. This is God's good and timeless method for relationships so that we can glorify him through our marriages.
We know everything that we've just shared with you is not very popular according to society or according to Hollywood. But when you look out there and you see the devastation, you see the adultery, the broken relationships, we need to stop and say, okay, something isn't working. We need something better. And as unpopular as this might be, this is ultimately God's design. Why not get back to the creator of marriage, of love, of sex himself? He created this. So surely he must know what he created it for and how it should work. And if you really want to dig in deeper, you're like, wow, this is a lot. My brain is like exploding. This is really, really hard. That's exactly why we wrote Love Defined, to unpack this in a way that you can kind of read, you can process it at your own pace. You can take it a chapter at a time and really process it at your own pace. So if you want to dig further, you want to dig into this, I challenge you to get a copy of Love Defined. Defined and start reading it. We really appreciate you sticking with this video. We know it was a long one and it was a serious topic, but if you liked it, we encourage you to give us a thumbs up. And if you want to see more from us, more content like this, you can check back on our YouTube channel because we post new videos every Wednesday. And if you want to see even more from us during the week, check out our blog over at girldefined.com. Like I could tell it wasn't there.
Because I was like, what is it? It's not commitment. It's the other one, faithfulness. We dug into this and just looked at statistics. Good. So I'll just kind of take it from you. Okay. Do you remember seeing when it went off?
I think it was still on when I finished.
It says, once your personal... No, I don't want to review it again. That was good, and we got this out of the way. It's hard to say.
If you appreciate the content that we produced in this video and you're like, yes, I want more of this, I want this on YouTube, I want my friends to see this, I want this to continue on, then we want to invite you to support us in a more personal way by supporting us with just $1 a video, $2 a video through patreon.com. It's a way for us to link arms together and say, yes, we want this kind of content on YouTube. So if you want to be that person that helps us to continue on, click the link below, patreon.com/girldefined.